when the seat came up, and it was like I think it was like a slight swing against him on his primary by like 0.003. He looked happy, but you could see in his head going, who was it? Who was it?
Who were those two people? Who were those two people?
I will find you. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes each week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to the Patreon of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. Okay, we're taping this one on a Wednesday afternoon on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And this is our final South Australian election recap. We're going to recap election day itself and all the things that have fallen out from it. And to help me unpack what was a historic night for the South Australian branch of the Australian Labor Party are my two good comrades from the great state of South Australia. She is the Executive Director for MacLeod South Australia, Hannah MacLeod. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And he is a senior advisor at Capitol and is a former chief of staff to various ministers in Labor governments. Matt Clemow, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
How are our heads this morning? Have we recovered from the celebration? Hannah, how are you doing?
Much better than I was Sunday morning at a kid's birthday party. That wasn't well planned by me.
How did you spend your Saturday night celebrating this historic landslide victory?
I was in the West Party for the Labor Party with the four Labor now incumbent members. So we've turned the West red. And, that was a very fun party, including the seat of Colton. We turned red off the Liberals, so that's Aria Bolkus into Parliament.
Fantastic. Matt, what about yourself?
I spent the first kind of hour of death in the office pushing F5 and annoying everyone else. I had 4 different TV screens going at one point, and a wonderful intern who works for us made some comments about if I was okay and how my brain works and all those kind of things. And once we had some kind of sanity from there, I got to party office kind of party the main headquarter party at about the same time as there was kind of a half hour of fear in those northern seats, and then was kind of stayed there for the rest of the evening.
Wonderful. Well, you guys richly deserved both the West End beer and the champagne, and also the headaches the next morning. So good job. Good job by you guys. Okay, let's just do a bit of a recap of the results itself, starting with, I guess, the party totals. The Labor Party, and obviously, as I said, we're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon, but you're hearing this either a Friday or Saturday or Sunday this weekend. And at this stage, there's only 65.2% of the vote has been counted. The Labor Party has got 37.6% primary. That's a swing against them on primary of 2.4%, but have picked up 33 seats. 24 was the magic number. Second is One Nation with 22.2% primary vote. That's a swing to them of 19.6%, and at this stage they have picked up 1 seat in the House of Assembly. The Liberal Party third with 19.1% primary vote. That's a swing against them of 16.6%. They currently have 4 seats in the lower house. The Greens have 10.3%, a swing to them of 1.2%. They don't have any seats in the lower house. And the others have got 10.8% of the primary vote. They've had a swing against them collectively of 1.8%. They've picked up 3 seats. 3 independents will take a seat in the House of Assembly. It's funny how the ABC have done it in that order, because they've put the Greens 4th, but they're actually not 4th, they're 5th. So the collection of others has actually got a higher primary vote by the margin of about 5,000 votes. Anyway, picking nits there. The seats won. So let's start with the seats won by the Labor Party. Morialta, Hartley, Unley and Colton. The seats gained by the independents from Libs is Finnis and Mount Gambier, and at the time of recording, seats won by One Nation is Nadgerry, and they've picked that up from the Liberal Party. The seats still in doubt, and we'll talk more about them in a moment, is Narunga, Hammond, our old friend Hammond, Hyson, is it Cavell or Cavell?
Carvel.
Carvel. The emphasis on the A, right? Carvel, Morfitt and McKillop. Let's go to you first, Matt, and look at the seats that were won on the night. What does this election say about where the voting intentions are of the people of South Australia? Where did Labor do well to start with, and then where did we see some surprises?
Yeah, I mean, I think during the past 3 weeks, we've been talking about the fact that this is a centrist government, and that the Premier holds no fear to those that possibly previously haven't voted Labor. Morialta and Hartley are 2 seats that the Rand and Wetherill, the Rand government held at various times, which, if it hadn't been in the collapse of the Liberal Party, would be out of Labor hands for quite some time. They have been won overwhelmingly. The seat of Colton, which I think many would have argued after the outstanding local member and former minister Paul Kiker finished, was out of Labor's hands for a generation, has come back to Aria Bolkus. And then the seat of Unley, which Labor hasn't won since 1989, and this is literally King William Road, the inner southern suburbs. I think all that comes to what we spoke about last week, being that there is a white collar, well paid, doing well voter cohort that have overwhelmingly left the Libs all over the country, but are enormous supporters of the Malinauskas government. At the other end of that, in our kind of lower socioeconomic seats, there has been an enormous scare from essentially empty chairs of One Nation candidates, where Labor has had a fall against it. There was some very interesting commentary from Anthony Green a couple of days ago, which I think kind of sums up where we are. In that, in Labor's marginal seats, they had a 9.4% swing towards them. That includes a whole lot of sophomores, those excellent now Labor members, half them ministers, who were elected in 2022. In the safe Labor seats, Labor had a swing to it of 4.4%. In its very safe Labor seats, Labor had a swing against it of 7.4%. So you've got essentially everybody earning over $100,000 happily to, absolutely vote for Labor in numbers that we haven't seen. People earning more than $150,000 voting for Labor at times when they otherwise ordinarily wouldn't. And then those at the other end of the income spectrum have happily flirted away for a variety of reasons here.
Hannah, I think you spent some time on election day in some of those communities. Where were you on election day, and what was, and I don't want to ask the question, give me a vibe check on the booths, but certainly you're an inquisitive campaigner, and I know you'd be annoying people and asking them questions. So what did you get a sense of the shift happening as folks were going to vote on Saturday?
I could definitely tell the difference. I did a bit of pre-polling in an inner city electorate of Badco, and vibe check there was pro-Labor, as you'd expect. Then I was on election day, I was out in the outer suburb electorate of Newlands with local member Olivia Savas there. It was at that time when I went, okay, this is real. You could really feel the voters walking in, grabbing a One Nation and No Others and going towards the polling booth. I guess what's tricky to know on the day is this just the 40% that always vote Conservative, or is it enough to tip the seat? And thankfully it wasn't for that seat of Newland and some others, and we managed to hold on to those seats. That one even in fact got a swing towards it, which I think just goes to show the dedication of that certain member of Parliament. Then I moved from Newland to Lee, which is sort of more of an outer suburb seat, traditionally Labor stronghold, that was formerly held by the former Treasurer Stephen Mulligan. And there as well, you could really tell the One Nation, sort of the move towards One Nation for those non-government voters, those non-Labor voters. There actually wasn't even a Liberal volunteer on the booth when I arrived, and it was just me, Labor, and One Nation. And I said to the One Nation bloke, "Where are the Liberals? Have they been here today?" And he said, "Well, actually, I was meant to run the campaign for the Liberal candidate, but I switched parties." And I think it was really obvious for people just in that final week that One Nation were a lot more organised. Pauline Hanson, who in the past has been criticised for being a little bit of a lazy campaigner, wasn't lazy this time. She was out, she was spruiking, she was connecting with voters, and then just that sort of next level down, they had volunteers on every single polling booth across at least metropolitan Adelaide, where the Liberals couldn't. The Liberals were really, really struggling with volunteers on election day. I heard from Liberal candidates that basically they were doing 10-hour shifts on pre-poll, going home, packing their own booth kits for election day. You know, they were themselves working their absolute guts out without that party machinery and the volunteers. And of course, now because of the sort of new funding model in which donations are non-existent and spending is capped, they couldn't do what they've done in the past, which is pay people to hand out on election day. So I could definitely sense that. On the booth in Newlands as well, I think it was opposite a petrol station that had run out of fuel during the week. So you had these other issues, you know, and I think the One Nation volunteer was saying, you know, how you can kind of say one little thing when you hand out the how to vote. They were saying, vote One Nation to lower your power bills. And that was it. That was their catch cry. Hey, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? To vote for a party that's promising to lower bills, even if they don't actually have a plan to get there.
I'm just trying to wonder what seat best exemplifies this challenge that we're talking about in terms of the One Nation vote eating into not just the Liberal vote but also Labor's vote as well. And Elizabeth would be an example of that. And for listeners at home, Ella Shaw, Labor's candidate, had a 14% swing against her on primary. So her primary was 41%. One Nation had a 22.9% swing to them on primary, taking on to 32%. And the Liberal Party had a 12% swing against them. Not that they've ever had a big vote there, of 5.7. Hannah, just describe for people outside of South Australia who are the people in Elizabeth?
Yeah, so Elizabeth would be known around the country as the electorate that had the old Holden factory. So this is very much your outer suburb, working class seat. This is a real Labor territory. I wouldn't necessarily say it's white anymore. A lot of new migrants are moving into Elizabeth because it's a bit more affordable, essentially, than living in the city. And that may have been just what saved Labor this time around.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, do we think that One Nation, like at a granular level, their campaign was focused on the economics, cost of living pressures, or was it around migration? What was the thing that you think that was in the minds of a voter when they were walking in, and why they were taking that One Nation had a vote?
I don't see them as exclusive, because if you're talking about immigration, it's immigration because of economics. So I don't think they're necessarily racist people. I just think they can't afford a house. Yeah. So they're blaming migration for the economic reasons. They can't afford their power bill. They can't afford a house, and now can't even put fuel in their car. And as we know, with any sort of crisis or any sort of economic pressures, that's more keenly felt in those who are already disadvantaged. If you're living 5 minutes from the city, the cost of fuel going up isn't that big a deal. If you're driving for an hour to get to work, it hurts a lot more.
Matt, on the opposite end, so where Labor ate into that cohort of voters that are earning, around about 100,000 or 150,000. What seats should we look at to examine what that looked like for Labor? Is it Unley or is it?
So, I'd probably look at the seat of weight. Seat of weight's clunky because of what happened in the 2022 election, because there were essentially two kind of independents running. But if you look at the seat of weight as a kind of standalone result now, Catherine Hutchison, who was elected at the last election, she's ended up, 52 primary, I think. I don't have the numbers immediately in front of me.
I can tell you.
The
52% primary, swing of 25.4% on primary to her, 9% swing against the Tories. Yeah.
Now, I think if you take out the quirky 2022 result when there were other independents in there, it's more so, the seat of weight was a seat of Martin Hamilton-Smith, former Liberal leader, and then, of course, Labor cabinet minister after that. If you talk about all those seats that are the traditional Lib seats and being last to fall, you would essentially have Bragg and Unley being more like the federal Sturt equivalents, and then Waite being next in line. To have that kind of outcome in a complete collapse of the Liberal vote in an area, like there are, the seat of Waite would have probably a quarter of its house lots would be more than 800 square metres. A median house price would be close to a couple of $1 million in kind of very, very large parts of it. I think if you're looking at the task ahead for the Libs, that's probably more instructive. I did some rough numbers very late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. With a magic number of 24, I get Labor on more than 25 seats with a margin of more than 16%. So if you're using a kind of Melbourne equivalent of what does that red wall look like, seats like Waite and the extraordinary results in Adelaide and Eldon, I can run through those in a sec. I think that is where the task is. I look at politics as who are going to run for the Liberals at the 2030 election, and it'd take a pretty special person to take 6 months off work, spend 90 grand of their own money to go run at a margin which is 17%. Really, really quickly, just kind of on those 22 sophomores in terms of those who were elected in 2022, Lucy Hood's gone from 6.1% to 17.8% in Adelaide. Erin Thompson in Davenport's gone from 3.4% to 15.2%. Nadia Clancy, now Minister Nadia Clancy, has gone from 5.5% to 21% in the seat of Elder. Sarah Andrews in Gibson, who was a surprise winner last time, 2.4% to 13%. Anna spoke about Olivia Savers in Newland before. So you're talking about seats that were won in 2022 are now unachievable in the next two terms.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I was going to talk about it later in terms of Labor's primary vote and where it got to. But maybe we can bring it in now, because one thing that surprised me on the line, and we talked about this in the very last episode, I was like, I think the primary should get to 41, 42. And I'm only basing that on the experience of, if you're a good government in your first term and you run a good campaign, and normally when you get elected, you're kind of getting elected on like a high 30s, right? But then you do a good job and you get rewarded and you win a whole bunch of seats that you don't normally expect to win, and you really bolster the seats that you've been hanging on to the point that you're just saying there, Matt. But also your primary gets to like 42. Like we had in between 2014 and 2018 in Victoria, we had a swing of 5.5% on our primary. We got to 40, almost 44% primary. And I just thought, Mallee deserves that. The government deserves that. And it didn't eventuate. But maybe in the inner city, in the seats that you're talking about, Matt, it is in that space, but it's just the other parts of the electorate that's kind of dragging it down a little bit, and they're unforeseen in some respects. Is that a fair analysis of why they didn't get to that kind of primary vote?
Yeah, and I think also there are probably 10 regional seats of the 47 where in a four-way Labor contest, Labor probably gets to 17 to 22, but is never a chance of winning. In those 12-way contests with a couple of independents who Labor has been quite happy to support, as well as a one nation vote, like if you've got Labor losing 10% primary in 20% of the seats, essentially because they're such broad contests, I'd say if you looked at that kind of, where was that missing 6%, I'd argue you've got a couple of percent gone in those regional seats where we were essentially crowded out, but were never a chance of winning, and a solid couple of percent hit in safe seats where a One Nation vote dragged us from 55% primary to 45% primary. Without any real chance of losing. There were those three areas on Saturday night that looked enormously airy for at least an hour. They'll all end up being north of 55-45. But I'd kind of break the missing 6% up into those kind of three cohorts.
Which is interesting then, because I take from that what I think what the lessons are there for us in terms of political campaign analysis is maybe it's going to get to the point in the future that looking at just the primary vote isn't the statewide primary is not a good enough guide for us to understand what an election outcome is or was, and that we have to start to actually look at what are your target 24 seats or whatever your target seats are, and what is the primary vote that you're tracking at in the lead up to the poll, and then what it was afterwards. Because if you did that, then it was a great night for Labor anyway. Let's not try to dumb it down. It was a historic night for Labor, but it was an incredibly historic night for Labor if we actually just look at the seats where we're actually focusing our resources in.
Yeah, and a lot of that change was baked in before. I said previously Rand's slam win in 2006, 28 seats, 45% primary. Labor went into election day with 29 already. Like if they held what they had election day, they were already the largest election day victory for a Labor Party in SA history. They've got at least four more than that, possibly even a fifth. And on any measure, will still be 3 or 4 points below that 2006 primary. These aren't four-way contests in 47 seats anymore. Like rather than having a primary split over maybe 220 people around the state, it's split by over 450 people around the state. It's a dilution of where they end up.
Which then creates this challenge from a campaign director of actually working out resource allocation. Like it's not like, we're starting to get into this space where we're now saying to members of parliament or candidates, we all need to treat every seat like it's a marginal seat. It's gone are the days where you can just sort of, I won Tats Lotto, I've got a safe Labor seat in the northern suburbs of Adelaide and everything's going to be easy and one day I'll go into the ministry. But Matt, I think the lessons from the last 2 or 3 cycles at a state and a federal level was, no, we need to treat every race and every seat like a marginal seat. And that makes it complicated, though, for a campaign director to work out, well, essentially, where am I going to allocate resources? And in South Australia, it's even harder because you've got caps and funding.
Cap. Add to that a funding cap. That
Can I
essentially...
I just wanted to add in the reason why South Australian Labor has been so successful is we have had these young women that we've spoken about, your Nadia Clancy's, your Olivia Savises, who haven't taken their seats for granted and who have worked them like they're a marginal seat, and they will continue to do so. So that's our great strength, I guess, and why we had such enormous swings towards us in those seats.
And to your point, Hannah, you're right. And in the pre-selection of candidates, there has to be a conversation about expectations in terms of what we expect from you, both as a member of parliament and doing your day-to-day job as an MP, but also that you are constantly having to campaign, and that, and also don't think that head office is going to come in and save you with all these resources. You're going to have to work with the resources that you've got in a strategic way that ensures that you put yourself in the best spot to get
Well, it also doesn't cost any money to knock on a door, Stephen. This is what these members should be doing anyway, just talking directly to voters and listening and, having their views heard, which is what these candidates have been doing, which is what these members of parliament have been doing. I believe Lucy Hood hasn't stopped door knocking. These members have just continuously been out there in their communities, which is essentially their job.
Yeah.
And I think, not that the Premier or party office, needed another lived experience, a reminder out of this. But I think that the reinforced message is going to be, don't leave a margin for error. Don't leave a fuel crisis for 2 weeks and things turn into shit a tiny bit more, where you should be fine compared to you won't be fine. I shared this with you both. I'm not sure about it, but we spoke about it online. But former Speaker Michael Atkinson has been heavily involved in the Enfield campaign, where Lawrence Ben was a late entrant following the retirement of Andrew Michaels. They had handwritten 18,000 how to vote envelopes, which were walked out by 120 volunteers. Now, you can call that crazy, or you can call that making sure that nothing can go wrong and you're not trying to play catch up late. Probably still err a bit on the former rather than the later. But again, in terms of that volunteer effort, and I don't know, Hannah, you spoke a couple of weeks ago about donations taking away some of the kind of camaraderie and the catch-ups of that. I think some of the lessons of this will be the way to stay connected is to do the cheap stuff that kind of allows you to continue to reinforce that and be a part of a movement. And, in all honesty, I'd much prefer to be doing that stuff than doing the fundraiser stuff anyway. I mean, that's the stuff that does actually matter.
Yeah.
I'm resisting then doubling down and making a big argument as to why organising is the most important thing that we can do on campaigns. But everyone on this show has heard me say that before. So just go back and listen to another episode of me going on that rant. Can we turn to the seats in doubt next? And can I run through them and get both of your thoughts on it in terms of what's going to happen? Why don't I start with what the ABCs give me, and that's the seat of Hyson, which currently actually, Matt, do you have those stats in front of you there, or do you want to give me a
so I said the easiest way that I would lump them together is I would say Hyson and Morford are Labor versus Lib contests. They are what have historically been very Lib-safe seats. In the normal contest, they wouldn't be in play anyway, but they were in play largely because of the federal election results. Hyson has a bit of Boothby and a lot of federal Mayo. Morford is entirely federal Boothby. At the moment, Labor and the Libs are pretty close. You're talking. Morford was 4 votes last time I looked. Hyson was in the 2 digits rather than 3 digits. In a normal postal world, you would imagine the Libs would be okay from there. But again, you do have quite a complicated vote with enough other party vote that were those who were, unwilling to hold their nose and put one in the Labor box. Did they do one for somebody else, but then reward the Premier with their second vote. The current Hyson count is 96 difference, and the current Morphett count is 4. So I'd put those two into that category. We'll leave our friend Hammond alone because we always need to come back to that last.
I just quickly want to say on Hyson, as this has been the one seat that the Greens have been targeting to pick up in the lower house. They're on currently, I think, about a 23, 24% primary vote there. So they've done really well, but not enough to nab it.
And to that point there that you were saying, Matt, there was actually a modest swing against Labor in both those two seats on our primary, and then it's coming back to us in preferences from minor parties, including One Nation, who had a 10% swing to them, and particularly like if you look at Hyson, but not enough for the Greens.
Yeah.
Well, on that, Hannah, what? Yeah, I mean, the Greens were. I mean, how realistic were the Greens about Hyson?
It was their one seat. I feel like they were focusing on. They had Peter Coombe doing an election event for them. They were all in on Hyson. They had put all their volunteering effort because of the funding caps and the like. They didn't have the resources, and they had sort of like a community day of action in Hyson where they were screen printing their own Hyson shirts. So really getting the community involved behind this candidate there. They put in a lot of effort. And just were unable to secure the seat this time. And I kind of go, well, if you haven't done it this time, you might not next time either.
Yeah, I mean, in a non-Malinauskas world, Labor falls 500, and those 500 go to the Greens. The Greens run second, Labor runs third, and Labor and the Greens do in the seat. I think that has been their problem for the last year. Is there's been such a willingness to vote for the Premier from otherwise Greens or Liberal voters. That's where that bleed has been. Talking about the other two seats kind of as a lump, and they're both kind of linked to Libs on former criminal problems as well. So the seat of MacLeod in the southeast, Nick McBride, who saw the ABC interview on Saturday night. Jesus, have a look. That is a One Nation versus Lib contest where One Nation's currently in front, but the further they get through preferences, the more Labor preferences and other preferences are allowing the Libs to claw back. And if I was betting now, I would say that the Libs will overtake, and there'll be a new member for MacLeod, Rebecca Rosser from Liberal Party, who used to work at Saka, amongst other things. Narunga, really similar. That was probably the one before the election. You probably thought the One Nation had the highest chance. On counting, and I've seen some more numbers today even, after going pretty terribly on primary, the Libs are absolutely flying on 2PP because kind of everyone's climbing up. I think we'll talk about this later, but I think one of the further data lessons out of this will be those who voted for One Nation, and then they kind of got stopped on that primary number, that there wasn't a large claw up after that. Again, there's a new Liberal opponent in there, and I would have thought they would both be members of Parliament by the time counting finishes at this week. A couple of the other in doubt ones are just weird, where they need to continue the count. But Matt Schultz in Carville will almost certainly win. They just need to do some more counts to make sure that the Libs are finishing in fourth. And then we end up at Hammond, which I think is probably going to be the most disappointing outcome out of this.
I know.
I think a spread field of 5 with the collapse of the Lib vote, and then with the what will now be the forever decision of the Libs to preference One Nation, and therefore anywhere from legitimise them to validate them. Hammond's going to get a One Nation member because of the Liberal preferences.
Shame. Yeah, Simone Bailey, 23% primary, swing of 4.1% for Labor, leads the count on primary, and only by, a couple hundred votes, not even that, but no, you're right.
58 votes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, I think it's almost impossible to see a world. Ellie Keane, who's the fourth independent there, former Liberal staffer, ran as an independent last time. The reason why it's so complicated is her 10% has to come out and go somewhere before they can end up. There is a world where the Libs, if they were to get all of that the Libs could end up second and then Labor could get the Lib up. But yeah, I think if there's one kind of horrible outcome out of this, it's been that. Closing that off just in terms of one seat that the one seat that One Nation has won, which is the seat of Nadgery. A very, very peculiar, almost kind of friendly fire example where Tony Piccolo, the member for Light, moved next door to run for Nadgery. Tony's done so well that he's finished above the sitting Liberal member, Penny Pratt. In exchange for that, Penny Pratt's preferences have got One Nation elected. So, Tony's killed her first and then she's killed him as she's fallen out. I think, without carping on it as a sign of what we're going to see. The candidate's name, David Patton, first name, David Patton, Deputy Mayor of a council, refuses to use the electorate's name and calls it by its former name of Frome. So we're going to have an absolute shit show when Parliament resumes, where there's a fair chance the Speaker's going to call on the member for Nadgery and he's saying, I don't answer to that. So anyway, let's move on to other things.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a winners and losers kind of conversation, and we're going to move through them by party. So we'll start with Labor and then we'll go to the Tories, One Nation, the Greens, Independents, and then others, which others doesn't necessarily have to be other parties, but could be other things that happened on election day that could be a winner or a loser as a way of structuring this conversation. So let's start with obviously the great Australian Labor Party winners, lots of winners to talk about, but obviously the first one is the Premier Peter Malinauskas. How significant a win is this for Labor and the future of the state, like in terms of what this means for Peter, what this means for his leadership, what this means for the party going forward? How significant a win is this? I'll go to you, Hannah, first, and then I'll jump on you, Matt.
In short, very significant. This is the best election result Labor's ever secured in the state. This gives the Premier a clear mandate for his election commitments, and he's hit the ground running on these already. He said on election night that this isn't an invitation for adulation, this is an invitation to continue to work our guts out. And we've spoken about South Australian Labor's success is been because they've been working hard. So I think that just secures this for another term. I mean, people are saying with this result and with the essential wipeout of the Liberal Party, it's his if he wants it for what, 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms.
Yeah. Matt, where does Peter Malinauskas fit in the pantheon of South Australian Labor politicians? I was going to say leaders, but I want to extend it out to politicians because there's been some great federal politicians in the Labor caucus as well. But where does Mally fit in that pantheon?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it came from Nick Xenophon did an interview during the campaign just about some health issues that it had, and he said in that interview that if he were to win as is expected, then you're in a position where it becomes in a South Australian Premier sense, play for Dunstan Malinauskas, and essentially, Xenophon essentially already putting him ahead of Rann and Weatherall in that sense. I think there's a difference in terms of presence on a national scale and also aid. I think the biggest legacy is going to be the decimation of the Libs in terms of as an ability to come back. I know you and I were speaking before, and we're both going to speak about Tom Cootes and Tonus's efforts on ABC on Saturday night. But Tom was commenting on something which Jay Weatherall used to always comment on, that there is such freedom in not having to look over your shoulder, that when you do have a leader that is absolutely supported, they have the freedom to lead, I think is kind of the words that Tom used. I think the legacy of Saturday's win and how big Saturday's win is, all those sophomore MPs and all those future ministers, they now have such a buffer that they don't have to look over their shoulders locally. They don't have to be terrified of a candidate. They can do what they think is the right thing in their electorate. They can do the things that they think are right economically, knowing that, you're not needing to protect somebody here by 2% by playing dead or keeping people out of the ministry who you want in the ministry because they have some local challenges or all those things. I think this allows, whatever open the shoulders sporting analogy that you want to use, this is such a sizable win that it gives you freedom to govern. The one last point on that, there was a point Saturday night where Minister Claire Scriven looked in the strife at 5 on the LegCo ticket. She'll be fine now. She's been reappointed as a minister today. It's unthinkable for Labor to have 10 seats in a 22-seat LegCo. And again, if you're talking about the freedom to govern, even if we make somebody president, we still need 2 votes for any bill, and there'll be people lining up to be those 2. If we make somebody else speaker, president, if we hilariously Corey Bernardi in the president's chair on Monday, then it is 1 vote. I think if you look at that freedom to do big things, I think that will be the greatest legacy out of what happened on Saturday night.
Hannah, who are your winners for Labor on Saturday night?
In addition to Peter, it's the rest of the Labor caucus. Then you go down the line. So these not only the members that have held and increased their margins. So we're talking the Nadia Clancy, who has been appointed as a minister today, Sarah Andrews similarly, and then your new incomers. So we've got Aria Bolkus into the caucus. We've got Alice Rolls, who's won as the member for Unleash. She's actually straight into the ministry as well. That being the big winners out of Saturday night.
Yeah, and then there are, despite what was a significant scare on Saturday night, you have 7 highly qualified people around government and around politics who will now, I've not added up, but it'd be margins north of 12%. So everybody down from Jenny Mitten, who is replacing Leon Bignell in the seat of Mawson, and then Megan Spencer, David Wilkins, James Agnes, Lawrence Ben, Shane Rich, and
Ella Shaw.
And Ella Shaw. Ella Shaw. You always forget one. These are highly talented people that has allowed Labor to renew at the same time as growing seats, and as it will be by quirk, certainly not losing any despite a One Nation scare, albeit Tony Piccolo exits the Parliament after vacating his seat to run next door.
Yeah, that was one of mine that I wrote down as another winner was youthful and renewal. Jessie McCrone on the Feeney Files we taped yesterday said she remarked how youthful and beautiful the South Australian caucus is, and the fact that Tom Koonce-Tonis at the ripe old age of 55 is the grandfather of the Parliament just speaks to this regeneration of this Labor caucus, and I just think that is so important for building a legacy. It's and hats off to the branch for having the maturity to do that and find talented people from different parts of our community to represent their electorates.
Yeah, and then again, after the cabinet renewal today, even though there hasn't been kind of significant personnel change, you've had 3 ministers leave, in a pre and post election sense. That new cabinet outside Minister Scriven, the other 14 have all got kids in primary school. Kyam would be the closest to having a high school kid. Talk about knowing what parents' WhatsApp groups look like and what it is that are annoying people. Try any of those kids' sport normal kind of things. I think that fundamentally changes decision making.
And you contrast that, and it's a huge contrast to make because it's over the other side of the world, but one of the challenges the Democratic Party's facing in the United States is they're literally just trying to crowbar out 87-year-olds from congressional seats that have held since, the pre-Cold War. This is what success building looks like, I think.
Yep.
Another winner for me is obviously the South Australian election campaign machine and Eamon Burke and the team that he's built. I thought it was an exceptionally great campaign. And one thing that I've always admired about South Australia in their campaigning is that they've got this laser-like focus on these are the seats that we're going to focus on and these are the seats we're going to win. I hate tinkering, sort of this sort of pivoting back and forth between, let's throw resources into it. It doesn't look too good. Let's pull back out again and just stuffing people around. But just this focus. These are the seats we're going to resource and these are the seats we're going to win. I know we joked a bit about Hammond and having the Premier head out there, but I'm sure that they were very, very clear about what the seats we're trying to win, and that's how we're going to make sure we get government. So I just think that they've done another exceptional job on delivering a resounding victory. I've got one more, unless you guys have got any more. I've got two more. I've got one more. Stephen Mulligan, the Herb Elliott of South Australian politics. Now, I know I'm making a bit of a 90. Hannah's going, who the hell is Herb Elliott? Herb Elliott is one of my favourite runners, middle distance runner for Australia, won gold in Rome in 1960, 56 with Melbourne.
Yep. This is like it's like an Adam Collins conversation so far, but
I'm sorry about that. But anyway, the reason why I love Herb Elliott was because Herb Elliott quit when he was ahead. He was on top of his game. He won gold in 1960. He held the world record, and he went, you know what? I've done everything I can in athletics, and I'm going to quit. And in some ways, Steve Mulligan is the epitome of that. He's quit at the top of the game. He was a member of parliament. He was a minister. He was the treasurer. He gave a lot to the party. He gave a lot to his state. He was honest, committed individual. I met Steve Mulligan when he was a youthful delegate from Adelaide Uni to the National Union of Students, and he went on
Flinders Uni. Flinders Uni.
He was at Flinders, was he?
Oh, yes. He and
Adelaide.
He and Alex Dyson were both there.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, that's terrible. Yeah. Well, Flinders Uni is obviously a bedrock of student unity activists. Well, it was once. I don't know if that's still the case anymore. Things change.
It was when I was there too, Stephen.
Very good. Good on you. Alumni. I'm very proud alumni that you have at Flinders Uni. But, he's gone on his illustrious career and given a lot to his state. And just watching him, I saw clips of him on the Channel 9 coverage on Saturday night, and he just looked very content and happy, as you would be, as everyone was. But I said, good job by you, Steve.
He looked very, very happy when he was giving it to David Spears over how could you do this to your party. And there was one kind of incredible moment on Channel 9. So Michelle Lensing, former housing minister, elder kind of stateswoman of the upper house, I think most would regard as a thoroughly decent person on the other side of Parliament, absolutely tore Spears a new one, saying, how could you do this to the people around you? How have you still not said sorry for your colleagues and your staff that you dragged down? And Muller's just sitting there with a wry smile on his face. But no, I think incredibly important to note. I think it was put to me that when Stephen and John Gardner, after going to uni together, actually entered Parliament together on the same day. And if you think, what does success look like? You get a couple of terms in opposition, you get a couple of terms in government, you hope to be a minister. In a perfect world, you get to be treasurer. Mullers has just skipped the extra term in opposition. He got to do everything else, but his only kind of downtime was as shadow treasurer taking down a one-term government. It's an extraordinary contribution.
So there you go. Herb Elliott for South Australian Labor politics. Good job.
I will text him that right away. Good job, Herb.
Hard to pick any losers for Labor, and I don't say this I don't want to use this as a sort of way of picking on people, who, particularly Tony Piccolo lost his seat. I don't mean it in that way, but just sort of where did we one area that I was like, if you had a little bit more time, you might have put more focus into it. And, this is definitely Monday quarterbacking, and we kind of talked a little bit about in the very last episode, the contrast campaign against One Nation and the dirt unit moving faster than they did. And I think the lesson out of this is that we need to spend more time running negs or contrasts on all of our opponents and not just who we think are our opponent, which normally is the Tories or the Greens in sort of inner city seats, but also One Nation now have to be held to account for who they are and what they stand for. My only reflection was that that's a lesson out of this campaign, is that we now need to spend a little bit more time in our dirt unit digging up sort of shit on these candidates to let voters know exactly who they are voting for when they walk into the ballot box on a Saturday or in pre-poll.
Yeah, I mean, I've always looked at, as an outsider, as the difference between the Green Rise in Melbourne compared to the Green Rise in Sydney, and the Sydney party took an all out attack approach to not let that Green foothold happen. I think there is I'm not saying it's for the party to do or for party members to do, but I think there's an enormous obligation on the movement to not allow our people to think that Cory Bernardi is on their side. And I think I can understand that it was humorous while it was tearing down Lib primary. I can also understand that while there are empty chair candidates who we are actually targeting, you were saying before about the kind of One Nation campaign. I think probably campaign's a little bit strong. Like, it was essentially a Cory and Pauline touring around saying, you're unhappy with the uni party, you don't like what they're doing, send them a message. And Ashton said that was okay, and we didn't say it wasn't okay. And in that vacuum, close to 30% of the state did. And that's a terrifying number. Now, I'll let you, I don't think that number's anywhere near 30% if you're campaigning against that 30%. If you're leaving that 30% in a vacuum, you've got to have enormous faith on a personal vote or a party vote in those areas. And I think the most winningest campaign in state history, extraordinary result, it's all going to be okay. An extra week of fuel prices, and there could have been 1, 2, 3 really unfortunate non-winners in this conversation now, and that would have been a horrible outcome.
Yep.
I just want to go back to Tony Piccolo. So that's a big loss for our caucus. He was elected 20 years ago. I think he knew what he was doing, essentially not running for Light and going into a much harder contest with knowing full well that he might not be able to win, but to allow a next generation to run in the seat of Light. So I want to thank him for his service and his sacrifice, and wish him all the best.
Here. Our party is stronger for people like Tony.
And for a ongoing piece of campaign material, I think Tony was the first who thought, if we don't like the newspaper, let's just start our own. And he printed a 16 or 20 page thing quarterly called Enlightenment for the seat of Light.
Brilliant.
And we're page 1, Tony Piccolo, page 2, Tony Piccolo, page 3, Tony Piccolo. And he would have, this is utterly true story, constituents would call the electorate office and say, I don't seem to have my newspaper. Can I come in and get one?
That's brilliant. Okay, are we ready to move to the Libs? I don't know. Does anyone have any winners for the Libs? I mean, I've kind of got one, but I don't know where to put it because it could have also been a loser as well. But Hannah, to you first. Any winners for the Libs?
I would definitely say Ashton Hearn is a winner. She wasn't expected, like the result was already known before she took the leadership. I don't think this is on her. I think she performed brilliantly, particularly in the debates. She sized up quite well against this enormously popular Premier. She got a swing towards her in her own seat. So I think if they can hold on to her as opposition leader for as long as possible, I would advise them to do so. I'm spent a lot of time in the Northern Territory where a similar sort of female young leader, Leah Finocchiaro, was elected in 2012. by her second term that her government, the CLP government, were wiped out. They were down to just 2 seats out of 25 in the Northern Territory. She became Deputy Opposition Leader of 2, and then very shortly after, with the resignation of the leader, became the leader. She held on all of this time. She had the blokes in her party snapping at her heels, and she has obviously secured an absolutely thumping victory in the Northern Territory, and has, by all accounts, been a formidable Chief Minister. So definitely I would say Ashton as a winner. I've got 2 others as winners for the Liberal parties. The only 2 members to get a swing towards them, which is Sam Telfler in the sort of regional seat of Flinders, and who was looking maybe possibly of losing his seat, so he's hung on with a swing towards him. The other one is the seat of Bragg, Jack Batty, the local member there, which we've discussed a little bit. That's the one in the federal seat of Sturt that includes sort of Burnside, that really inner city blue ribbon Liberal area. He again has had a swing towards him, and I put that down to the fact that he is a really, really good local member and has been speaking to those people on the issues that concern them. He's been able to hold on as... Is he the only metropolitan Adelaide seat to hold on, Matt, for the Libs? On current count. Yeah, maybe on current count, he's withheld that red wave from the Malinauskas popularity. So well done, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the winners are everyone outside of Ashton or Tim who's going to be in the Parliament who thought they weren't going to be there on Saturday morning. I think you would kind of expect that to be Jack. I think Sam Telfer's effort on the West Coast was extraordinary, to be honest. 35% primary kind of last I saw, field of 12, 3 different independents coming at him. And then if you were to assume that Josh Teague, the Deputy Leader, holds on in Hyson, and Stephen Patterson, Shadow in the Energy and Other Things Minister, hangs on in Morphett, they've certainly got jobs at threat. I think it has been a little bit cute, some of this kind of we won from 3rd on the podium, saying, the Libs saying people said we were going to get 0, we got 8, yay. Well, yeah, we had 16 last time, we need 24 to win. Let's not celebrate 8 kind of overly. I think in a betterment for the Parliament, I think if the candidates for McKillop and Narunga can stay on top of those 2 One Nation candidates, and that's a much better outcome for the Parliament.
Losers for the Liberal Party. We could be here for an hour, but...
3rd on the Legco, I'd say, is probably the most significant. So Rowan Mumford, I may have some of this wrong, but certainly former party president, ran against Starkey for mayor pre-selection, maybe even against Briggs before that. Has been that name that's kind of around the place and around the place and around the place. Has been Ashton's chief staff for the most recent time, goes to a 3rd Legco spot and doesn't get there. But that is enormously hard. And you'd think, nobody's had that kind of lightning struck twice kind of thing. Vincent Tarzia is the most high profile loser of those who did. The other seats in this probably does equate for some of the swing. Colton, Unley, Morialta all had vacating members. So Tarzia was the sitting member who lost outside of the Libs who had become independents previously.
Hannah, losers?
Yeah, just the Liberal candidate. Some of those in those seats that Matt mentioned, for example, the Liberal candidate for Colton. These people, they work their absolute hearts out, and they did it in a time where their primary vote was at the lowest it's ever been, where they have no volunteers, no support. They're doing much of it themselves, really long days for months and months and months, and probably, looking in the eye of defeat the whole time. So, and really,
and the biggest,
and
biggest loser of all, and we shouldn't forget this at all, is the 2030 spending cap. Liberal HQ, whether it's Alex Hyde still there or wherever, whoever Antics installed after that, that 2030 spending cap is going to be less than half of Labor HQ spending cap.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That was one of mine, was their funding for the next campaign. And obviously, and to underpin that, their primary was appalling. And that's what sort of really got everyone outside the state of South Australia sitting up and paying attention to this election. One more loser out of this, harmony between the Liberal wets and dries. I don't know if you saw the back and forth between, well, the not wanting to have the back and forth between Christopher Pine and Antic.
Great.
Oh man, and Chris Pine, and rightly so, was raging about being basically thrown into the spotlight or under the bus, or however you want to give it. And he handled it well, saying, "Dude, I am not going to have an internal conversation about where the Liberal Party goes in front of all of you just to please you." But you could just see that there is genuine tension between the moderate wing and the conservative wing of South Australian Liberals, and that is going to get played out over the next 4 years. And Ashton Hearns is going to have to deal with it, which is going to suck.
Yeah, and I've not looked at the makeup of these other two, but it's not going to get better.
No. One Nation winners.
So, I mean, third on the LegCo. Let's kind of start from there. You've got a candidate who, even after they got bumped down by Corey's addition, never would have dreamed of having 8 years in the Parliament at, what's that, 225 grand plus some loading for 40 days, 45 days of sitting a year. These are prize spots. There's probably interesting to note that the candidates who ran as independents after being in the LegCo for 8 years, all kind of failed to get 3,500 votes, I think was the highest. So in terms of the, gravitas that's placed on people when they're in the Parliament compared to what the kind of electors do when they next face them, this has been the history of Democrats here and then Xenophons here and all those kind of stuff. And then you've got, what will inevitably be a power struggle between Corey and the number two, Carlos Caremba, who has been a candidate before and has been around the system for a long period of time. But whilst they've got 8 years up there, the question from now is how long they stay as an actual group. Whereas the lower house winners, one or two of them, you're talking about 4 years and having to actually do a whole lot of work.
Another winner would be Pauline Hanson herself. So this is a huge coup for her. This is now, she can use this to springboard and say, this hasn't been a fluke. This hasn't been an accident. This hasn't just been in the polls. I've managed to deliver it. And now let's look at Victoria, New South Wales, federal.
Yeah. Losers for One Nation?
So there's a candidate for Adelaide whose name as spelled on the ballot paper was AOI Baxter, which was AO, I assume. There's a story during the campaign that his real name was Trent. And then 2 days before the election, there was ABC broke the story that UK police had a warrant out for his arrest for some sexual activity where he hadn't fronted up in court. I'd stood on pre-poll with him for 5 days before that. Show me a world where you hide for international police on a ballot paper. I would just never understand any of it. It did stop One Nation from handing out in Adelaide on the Saturday outside of one booth where they had some LegCo tickets, which made Saturday's experience a little bit nicer. They still got 10.1%. So,
yeah, there you go.
I should quickly, on the winners of One Nation is obviously the bank account. So contrast the losing for the Liberal Party, all of that money is going straight into One Nation coffers now for the next South Australian election.
I don't have any winners for One Nation. We've got one more loser, and it's something I just sort of noticed from the count. Their primary gets stuck on an island in the actual count if it's not getting preferences coming through to them. You can, it's interesting to see in one or two of the races, they got a primary high 20s, low 30s. Normally, in a certain contest, that could be enough to then get you into a winning position. But in the races where there weren't getting enough preferences coming through them, they were just stuck on this island, and you could see other parties overtake them, eventually win, unless you're getting preferences from the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And so I think that there's a double loser there, and that's one, the One Nation are stuck on this primary island, but two, losers are the Liberal Party. You are putting One Nation candidates into Parliament, and in the end, that's going to cost you, not us.
Mm-hmm.
Greens winners.
So the upper house vote was actually pretty good. There was a chance on Saturday night where they would have been confident, and not just in a green confident way, but confident of Katie McCusker getting up in the Legco. They were at 0.5, we were at 0.4 for a period of that. That's obviously reversed now, but yeah, their upper house thing was quite high. I mean, after every campaign, the Greens go out and announce this is the most successful campaign they've ever had, and they get one upper house seat and 0 lower house seats. So, it'll help them in a cash sense. They've done pretty well cash-wise. So they certainly campaigned for Hyson, much like has been seen previously. They're not getting that metro vote. Like it's not Adelaide, Norwood, Unley, where they're going to be in any position in any time soon to finish second, despite how dead the Libs are. Just got a text from the independent candidate for Carvel saying his postals are going okay, so there's nothing to worry about. So there you go. Heard that here first. So I said, I can't see the Greens kind of getting to a threatening position there. So it's always going to be the odd exception where they are a lower house threat rather than the norm.
Winners, Hannah?
No winners for the Greens, and I think just on the losers would be the fact that now One Nation have entered Parliament just drowns out their voice even further.
That's my loser as well. I just think if you're the Greens and you've been around longer than the One Nation Party, you've been busting a nut for how many years across all of the different state branches and federal elections to be relevant and to build on your successes of previous election cycles and eat away at primarily the Labor Party vote. And then One Nation in January basically arrive on the scene with minimal campaigning, like infrastructure in the way that we consider it, and go from a 10, 7, 5% primary to 20, 22, 23, 24, and eat into the opposite side of the political spectrum, the Liberal Party vote, you'd be absolutely raging and looking at each other going, what are we doing wrong? And the fact that, like we said at the start, like Other has got a higher primary collection than the Greens. The Greens actually are fourth.
It's a long time to be told by somebody we just want to be friends, isn't it? And then
I know. I was trying to think of some shit analogy, and that's it. Yeah, we're just friends. We're just friends.
Yeah, and this cute guy. And this cute guy's just walked into the bar and see you later. Bye.
In an orange t-shirt with slightly awkward opinions about life, but I'm really interested in that. And your moral superiority is just, I just don't dig it.
What's the Tay-Tay thing? I can make anyone nice for a weekend or whatever it is.
Yeah. Independents winners.
So Matt Schultz and Carvel previously mentioned, dual in the Liberal Crown. John Olsen as Premier held the seat after coming back from the Senate in the middle of Mayo. Matt Schultz will replace Dan Cregan as the independent. And again, probably will need dynamite to blow him out. A much lower primary result than you would expect, but Labor promised $200 million during the campaign and got the mayor to 28% to win. And there's a really sizable One Nation vote in the outer parts of Carvel as well. But you would imagine he'll be there for as long as he wants. Travis Fatchen or Trav, as he markets himself, in the seat of Matt Gambier. Travis Fatchen ran Troy Bell's electoral office, so the whole time that Troy was in the Parliament and in court and all those other things. I spent 3 days in Matt Gambier when we did the second podcast, and there was genuine constituent view that Trav had been their guy during that time, and he had looked after their local matters, and he has been rewarded. And if you look at the history of History of the seat of Mount Gambier since 97. They've elected a non-independent once, and that was Troy as a Liberal before he was charged. You would imagine that is a long way away from falling back into the Liberal fold. Jeff Brock, who will turn 80 during this term. There was a scare for about 20 minutes this morning when Exeter put up one booth on a 2PP recount, which had Jeff losing 48-52, and then you realise it was only 300 votes, and they just had their algorithm flowing through the wrong way. But Jeff has been returned, and I think there'll be a really interesting debate about who's going to run for Stuart next time, given there's so much economic activity in that area and what that looks like. Jeff has defeated the Peary Mayor as a Lib this time, but the 2PP will be against One Nation. And then I think in the one kind of example of a teal overlay, just because of how kind of South Australia works in a metro sense, Lou Nicholson, a councillor from Victor Harbour, has been elected as the member for Finnis. I think she's outstanding in everything that I have seen. Ran a kind of yellow coloured campaign, bright and uplifting, has beaten a former Liberal minister who she nearly beat last time. There's kind of Goolwa, Victor Harbour, each of those areas. Again, a seat held by former Premier Dean Brown. Also held by what would be the best equivalent, I would say, of a very smart woman who the Conservative side of politics should be trying to attract in those seats, instead beating them and having a stronghold for as long as she chooses to hold it.
That's interesting. Hannah, winners for independence?
I think Matt's got them all covered.
Are there any losers for independence?
In the upper house, there were a group of people choosing to try continue. Connie Benares from SA Best, Jing Lee from the former Liberal Party, Tammy Franks, former disendorsed Green.
Sarah Game, the former One Nation, now Fair Go.
Chris McDermott.
Yeah. So all of these weren't able to secure anybody else in the upper house.
Chris McDermott.
And you've also got,
So the Fair Go Party, Sarah Games' Fair Go Party, which Sarah Games said, don't vote for Sarah Games' Fair Go Party, vote for somebody else. But Chris McDermott was still saying, vote for me. They got 1,937 statewide votes.
Hannah, you want to say something?
just the other losers are those former Liberals turned independents with criminal charges. So your sort of Fraser Ellis's and the like.
And now let's turn to, I guess, miscellaneous winners from the night. I had Tom Cootes and Turnus on the ABC coverage. I thought Tom was exceptional. I really enjoyed. I mean, we can only get the ABC, I think, in outside of South Australia, but he made it for a enjoyable night watching Labor romp home, and his analysis was excellent. Obviously, Tom's a strong campaigner, and indeed an exceptional minister and person of government. But I just enjoyed his commentary. I thought he did an outstanding job. Any other winners that you want to name, Matt?
I'd say special kind of props to the wonderful Emma Rebellato from ABC. That Nick McBride was doing a live cross from Narracourt and was saying, you know, whilst I've had my issues and I think my issues have torn me down and Emma said, so could we just clarify, like when you talk about your issues, those issues would be that right now during this interview, you're wearing an ankle bracelet and you are on charges of assaulting your wife and breaking her arm. And you know, whilst all these things are before the court, I don't think we should be palming them off as issues, shall we? And then cross back to him.
Good.
Absolutely good.
Another winner that's been mentioned a few times on general coverage is sort of democracy and decency. This has been a really, really good campaign, you know, quite good on the polling booths. There hasn't been any rough and tumble. I think people may have been expecting it with sort of the One Nation volunteers there, but they were polite, upstanding citizens. They were really good. my partner, this is his first South Australian election. He's Northern Territory and has worked elsewhere interstate. And he just said, Adelaide and South Australia are the most polite people you'll ever meet. And that definitely was true this election.
Yeah, absolutely. And contrast that with handing out for the Labor Party in 2012 in far north Queensland when the Bligh government got absolutely belted was one of, and it was so hot and sticky, and it was 12 hours in a booth. It was one of the worst days of my entire life. Good point. Any other winners before we move on to then losers? I've got a bunch here.
I don't have a winner. I don't have a winner, but I just want to start with a loser.
Go for it.
Turnout. Turnout. We could end up being at a terrifying low turnout number here.
Why was that, do you think?
Well, that goes on to my second loser, which is, the Electoral Commission of South Australia. Oh, my goodness. So it's let's go back to pre-poll. On the pre-poll booths, the lines were so long. Like, people were waiting over an hour to vote early, and I was told, somebody had forgotten the password to log in, the iPads weren't working, they couldn't get connected to the internet. It really just wasn't of the standard. And then you go to election day, 8 a.m, people are at the booth ready to vote. They've got their kids in their sporting gear and their ballet outfits ready to get your vote done, grab your snag and hit the road. On lots of dozens of booths across Adelaide, voting didn't open. It couldn't open. They just said, sorry, guys, we're not online. We can't get your vote. I heard some booths weren't open until about 9:30, 10 o'clock on election day.
Yeah, there was a booth in Morphett, where the current margin is 4 votes. There was a booth in Morphett that opened at 9:30. Hour and a half in, and then you go to the other end. I was in Adelaide. The 2 out of the 3 CBD booths had more than an hour of people voting absentee when they closed the doors at 6 o'clock. There were more than an hour of people inside still, and they got them through. But that's how far behind that cram was. Let alone anyone who rocked up and went, "I'll take the $10 fine."
And then.
I was just going to say, I just feel, I feel for the staff. It's not their fault. Most of them are volunteers. It's actually the people at South Australian Electoral Commission's head office and the planning and preparation for that. And they're going to say, we don't get enough money. Sure, we'll then go to the government and say, these are the things that we need to resource our elections. Because I don't think you're going to find any government, Labor or Liberal, say, we're not going to fund you in the way that you run elections, right? It's in our interests that they are good elections. It's just the planning and preparation. And you have the data. You know where the big popular booths are. So you know what kind of allocation of staff and resources you need to put into those booths.
And my pre-poll in Adelaide, and I've argued this with all the powers that be over the last week, my pre-poll in Adelaide in Light Square had only paid parking around it for the entire 6 days. Now, there is no world where we can be in that you have to pay to cast your vote. That's utter bullshit.
Yeah.
We forecast this last week. I think the question was, what do you expect to see on Saturday night? And we said low voter turnout because they also didn't do a very good job at telling people when an election was on. There wasn't that advertisement of the election, and definitely wasn't that advertisement of you need to update your details before this date.
Another loser I've got. Sorry, Matt, you go.
I was just going to say, will this bring back an argument for corflutes? I think is where.
I hope so.
I hope not.
Just not to pile on the Electoral Commission, there also was, once booths were closed, a real delay in voting.
Counting.
Counting. Like some people were waiting to 9 p.m, 10 p.m. You can see. I don't think we've got these accurate numbers even today because they just haven't counted enough.
How much of that was a problem? Because normally if you're a returning officer, you can make that call at the start of the night and just say to the counters, okay, just separate all the ballot papers, put them into the piles of the 5, 10, however many candidates there are, and then start redistributing preferences of the lowest candidates straight to either Labor or Liberal. But in this instance, they were like, I don't know whether we need to redistribute to Labor or to Labor or, sorry, let me say that again. I don't know whether they were unsure as to go Labor Liberal or Labor One Nation, or even some of these 4-way contests where they're like, actually, we're not going to get this done tonight at all. So let's just count the primaries and send that through.
As I understand it on pretty strong authority from people that were there, 2 things happened. So the electoral commission at whatever level chose the 2CP in 47 booths before the night, which is what would ordinarily happen. And I think we've seen Casey and Anthony Green say that since. Booths were unable to do an alternate count without the express permission of the commissioner, and that permission wasn't granted in each of those things. So where it was clear, in the seat of Elizabeth as an example, where it was clear that this is never going to be an ALP Lib count, they weren't allowed to start an ALP One Nation count, so they had to continue through doing a throw that was utterly meaningless at that point. And I'd argue, particularly for Ella and for James Agnes, and certainly for Nick Champion to a certain extent, probably caused additional discomfort by continuing to count it the wrong way.
Yeah, needs more flexibility on that kind of stuff to empower returning officers, particularly experienced returning officers, to make that decision. They've seen this 10,000 times. They do it every 3 or 4 years. Like, let them actually make that decision. And if it's wrong, that's okay. They're going to get recounted 2 more times anyway if it's close.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Casey Briggs, I've got him down as one of my losers. I didn't think he did a very good job on election night. And I know he's got big shoes to fill with Anthony Green departing the scene. I think this is his first time doing this.
It's his second, I think.
Is it his second? What was the other one? Did he do? No, because that was Anthony Green's last one. Because remember, the computer kept on breaking, and he was like going, "This is my swan song, and nothing is freaking working."
He did Tasmania when they went for their annual election.
Does that count? Look, I want him to succeed. I'm in his corner. I just thought he was very hesitant. And I understand there was a lot of complications going on behind the scenes, but there was a couple of times there going, Casey, back yourself, mate. Just back yourself, because the punters want to know what's going on. You've got to make a call, and you can clarify it.
I think
like you look at people like Steve Kanaki that does the MSNBC. There's a lot of complications in a US count. He has a team behind him helping him. Casey, you take us on a journey, not dickheads like us that are obsessed with this sort of stuff, but people that are less involved in an election count. Take us on that journey, help us work through what's going on. I just thought he was a little bit hesitant at times, but he'll get better as he does more of these. Another loser I've got, just the general political analysis of the post-campaign writing. Like, I read one which was, I think, in the ABC, and I'll read the quote. But even if the party does not break into the lower house, let's talk about the One Nation, it has radically redrawn the electoral map. Labor has won nearly every seat in Adelaide, but beneath the sea of red, One Nation has replaced the Liberals as the main opposition in most of the city. Okay, that is true, but it has not redrawn the map. The map is still red.
Yes.
All that's happened is that One Nation has become the most popular loser.
And that's not quite true either. Liberals were still second in those inner city seats as well. So it's not.
There's desperation by the journalists to make this story about One Nation when the story actually was about Labor and Malinauskas having the biggest win in the history of their party. And I just thought that it just took a lot of gloss away from really what was a great night for the Labor Party. And I wonder if it had been any other party, would they have done that? I don't know. Any other losers, or are we all done?
I've got one, my stomach. What's the point of being on a primary school booth if they're not going to have a democracy sausage sizzle? It's very disappointing.
In their own place.
Very disappointed.
There was some quality, I still call it Twitter because I refuse to call it anything else. But there's some quality Tom Kutsentonis tweeting on Saturday morning as he went from booth to booth going, here is your democracy spanakopita, and here is your democracy baklava, and here is your democracy, going through from Greek primary school to Greek primary school to Greek primary school.
I was in the wrong place.
It is well worth having a scroll back through.
I was going to say you can take the boy out of West Adelaide, but no, you can't actually take the boy out of West Adelaide. The boy will never leave West Adelaide. That's why he keeps on getting.
Yeah.
Actually, when they announced, when his seat, it's still West Torrens, isn't it?
Yeah.
When the seat came up, and it was like I think it was like a slight swing against him on his primary by like 0.003. He looked happy, but you could see in his head going, who was it?
That's right. Who were those two people?
I will find you.
I did look at the seat of Croydon, so the Premier's seat, just to see, and he got 80. It's 80-20. 80-20.
And the Lib ran, some other stuff we've covered off during the week, but the Lib ran 4th or 5th in 15 seats, which is also, imagine a world where the Labor Party runs 4th or 5th in a third of the state seats without being weeks and weeks of coverage. But in the Premier seat, the Libs ran 5th behind the Socialist Party that took buses over from Victoria.
I've got another winner, Stephen.
Go for it.
Every school and university poetry club. They would be frothing that the Premier read out pretty much an entire poem during his victory speech on Saturday night.
That's an excellent winner. That's a very good winner. I have one more winner to end with. My other two winners are Hannah and Matt. Good job by you guys over the course of the last 4 weeks. This has been a lot of fun. I've really, really enjoyed. South Australia in some ways it's obviously close to my heart. I lived there for a number of years, worked on campaigns there, was a union organiser, and it's just been wonderful to re-equate myself with old Adelaide town over the course of this campaign and the beautiful nuances of the South Australian state election, and having you two commit every week to making this a very successful podcast. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I was disappointed that you didn't fly in for a pie floater on election day, Stephen.
Look, I wanted to, but I looked at my diary with the work I had leading up to the 2 weeks beforehand, and if I did, I would have fallen asleep on the actual booth. And to that point, talking about, in community organising, we talk about swarming to the need as a norm and building teams. Hannah actually did the run sheet for the final episode before the election day. I was eternally grateful for you to do that because I was up to my neck in work. So that's how great a job you guys did. Matt, you literally going out to Murray Bridge and getting film of the bunyip. Like this is the level I expect from our guests when we're doing election coverage. So you've set a high bar for the Victorian state election, which will no doubt be with Feeney and Jesse McCrone. And what a great win.
I think the only way to close off from a second term Labor history Malinauskas government is a red can, I guess. So it's the only way to go. So cheers.
I'm going to live virulously. Cheers to you. Thanks, guys. Before we close out, don't forget, so this is obviously, we've got 2 episodes dropping this week. We've got the Feeney files are out this week as well. And next week we will resume normal programming of only having 1 episode a week. And I think on Monday just gone, we dropped our International Women's Day episode with Rebecca Thistleton, Melissa Donnelly, no relation, and Bettina Kovlos from The Guardian. So check that out. Lots of episodes, lots of content to check out. Oh, one other thing. The survey, the Social Democratic survey, we've extended it. It's going to close this coming Sunday. So that's Sunday, the 29th of March. So if you haven't completed it, please do. Remember, you go into the draw to win a trip to Adelaide to the ALP National Conference. It takes 5 minutes to do it. Really appreciate that. Hannah MacLeod, thank you so much. Keep up the good work at MacLeod.
Thanks, Stephen.
And Matt Clemow, thank you so much, and keep up the good work at Capital.
Cheers.
And we'll talk to you all next week. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.